Okay, so do you hear my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see the screen?
Yes, we see the screen. It's not in full screen, the presentation, but
yeah,
we see the screen. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Now it is perfect.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about dynamic planning in hierarchical active inference. And the goal of this presentation is to understand how we can model tool use in active inference. And this is a standard hybrid active inference model. We could encode for modeling tool use. We could encode in the discrete states 3 states, for example, which could be the initial position, the tool picked state, and the ball reached state. And we could encode this third state, the ball reached, in the preference matrix C. Then we could encode we usually encode the target position in the hidden causes, which is converted from the discrete model, and we could encode the arm configuration in the continuous hidden states and the arm dynamics in the dynamics function. And you see here that I plotted two different observation modalities, which are the arm proprioception and the visual observations of the hand, the tool, and the ball. However, we have, with this basic model, we have a few issues for modeling tool use. You see here a dynamics function commonly used in robotics implementations. And we usually compute a difference between the target position in the hidden causes and the hand position, which is computed by forward kinematics. But since the hidden states are encoded in intrinsic coordinates, we then convert this difference with the inverse kinematics, for example, the Jacobian transpose. So a first issue regards moving objects. In fact, in this case, we usually say that in active inference, the hidden causes act as a cause of our hand movements. However, in complex operations, for example, in pick and place operations, we must somehow dynamically assign causes or consequences. For example, in the first pick in action, the ball acts as a cause of our hand movements. However, in the second place in action, this ball acts as a consequence of another cause, which could be the goal position. And also, if the objects are moving, we must somehow represent in our internal model their dynamics. So a second issue involves the object affordances. We know that intrinsic and extrinsic representations are both crucial for advanced movements, for example, in reaching and grasping movements, or when we have to walk by keeping a fixed orientation of a glass in our hand. And we know that the human brain accomplishes these complex tasks by with the posterior parietal cortex, which can encode which encode the objects in some visual motor representations, which relates to our body configuration and to the object affordances. And we also know that the posterior parietal cortex can encode multiple objects in parallel, even after a considerable delay of time. So a third problem involves the hierarchical structures. We know that commonly in motor control implementations in active inference, we encode all the body joint angles in the hidden states, and we are usually interested in generating only the hand position. However, if you want to have a control over the whole kinematic chain, we actually need a deep hierarchical model that mimics the hierarchical structure of the generative process. And this is needed because we have to correctly predict the exchange of forces between the elements our kinematic chain. So another problem involves how these deep hierarchies can be adjusted over time. We know that the body schema representation in the brain is never static. For example, when we grow during childhood, but this body schema is actually much more flexible. We know that there have been many studies that show how for example, the motor cortex of the monkey brain can remap with extensive tool use. Here you see that the peripersonal, the representation of the peripersonal space of the monkey brain increases by taking into account the extension of the tool, and this is actually the environment, the boundary between the self and environment actually increases because the monkey is able to predict the consequences of its movements. So a last problem involves the communication between the discrete model and the continuous model. And this is usually done by maintaining different hypotheses over the environment. And these are reduced probability distributions here, defined here, which encode different hypotheses of the agent over the environment. And these probability distributions can encode, for example, the tool position or the ball position, so that the top-down messages from the discrete model to the continuous model can impose the priors over the hidden causes by combining these reduced priors and weighting them by the discrete probabilities. Instead, for the bottom-up messages, they can accumulate the continuous evidence for these discrete hypotheses, and this is done by Bayesian model comparison between the agent's prior surprise and the log evidence. And this log evidence, in particular, can score how well some discrete hypotheses can explain can be the true causes of what the agent is actually perceiving. So it can answer whether I'm at the ball or at the tool. And the problem here is that if these reduced priors are sampled from static hypotheses, the agent cannot operate in dynamic environments. So we need a way to update these reduced probability distributions. So I summarized the several problems into three main points. For modeling tool use, the agent must maintain beliefs about the objects in relation to the self, that these beliefs must be encoded through flexible and deep hierarchies, and that the agent must create a dynamic discrete plan based on continuous evidence. So about the first one, instead of encoding the target position in the hidden causes, we use a factorization of the hidden states based on the different objects on the environment in intrinsic coordinates. So we will have the first component which generates proprioceptive predictions and is related to the actual body configuration. And then we have different components which generate visual observations of the objects. But since these components are encoded in intrinsic coordinates, they can represent some potential body configurations related to the object affordances. So here you see a very simple perceptual task in which the agent has to infer some potential body configuration related to the red ball. And you see that the agent also maintains a belief over its actual body configuration. So now we compute a future state related to the agent's intention. For example, for a reaching action, we just set the arm component, the first component equal to the object component, and then as before we compute a difference. Do you see my cursor? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. And you compute a difference between the future and the current states, and you see that we have a useful decomposition between the arm attractor and the object attractors, which in this case is 0, and means that the agent doesn't intend to move the object. And you see that in this case, the hidden causes do not encode a target position, but they encode an trajectory gain, which multiplies this difference in the dynamics function. And this configuration is useful when we consider multiple dynamics and multiple objects. Here I added a third object and a second hidden cause. And in this case, if we consider that the agent maintains different dynamics functions, which are related to different intentions, this can be regarded as different hypotheses over the evolution of the environment. And so we can compute a trajectory by combining these different dynamics functions. If you consider this configuration with this kind of hidden causes, the hidden causes actually do not only act as attractor gains, but also as intention modulators. So like how policies in discrete models work. And for example, if we let the prior over the hidden causes depend on some tactile belief, we can afford some sort of fixed multi-step behavior. You see here that the agent has to first reach the red ball and then the gray square. And you see that the agent maintains throughout the task these potential body configurations, so that the transition between the two actions happens very fast. But the second point, we lost the ability to maintain beliefs about Cartesian positions. So what we do now is to consider a hierarchical model in which we follow the natural flow of the generative process. You see here an intrinsic level which encode the body agent angles, and an extrinsic level encoding the hand position. And these two levels are linked by a generative model computing forward kinematics. So you see that we have a useful decomposition between with these independent dynamics with intrinsic and extrinsic dynamics, which results in a simpler but more advanced design. And the inverse kinematics in this case, you see that emerges naturally by inversion of this generative model. And in this case, the goal-directed behavior results by inferring the intrinsic causes of the extrinsic attractors and then flowing down the propositive pathway. And you see that the inversion of this generative model and the back propagation of the extrinsic prediction error results in an update equation which is very similar to the dynamics function used in robotic implementations. So we now add different, as before, we now add beliefs about the entities of the environment. So in this case, we have the extrinsic hidden states can encode the hand and object positions, while the intrinsic hidden states can encode the real arm configuration and these potential configurations of the objects based on their affordances and the agent's intentions. And these are simple applications of this model. We can use it for defining multiple constraints in intrinsic and extrinsic frames of reference. For example, we can reach a target position by keeping a fixed orientation of our hand, or we can easily define circular or linear trajectories. If we now want to achieve a more advanced control over the whole kinematic chain, as I was saying before, we need a deep hierarchical model. So we know that the forward kinematic model is composed of as many identical blocks as the number of the elements of the kinematic chain. So we now consider a deep hierarchical model with intrinsic and extrinsic beliefs for every degree of freedom of the kinematic chain. For example, we would have a level here representing the elbow, in which the intrinsic in the states encode the joint angle and the limb length of that level only, while the extrinsic in states encode the joint position and the joint absolute orientation. So we now link all these levels, what we call an intrinsic extrinsic module. We link them by mimicking the real structure of the generative process of the kinematic chain, so that you see that the likelihood function connecting these levels is very simple. And in this case, the position of the new link's extremity is generated from the extrinsic belief of the previous link and the intrinsic belief of the new joint. And you see that we have each level predicts propositive predictions and visual predictions of that joint, and we have still a decomposition of different dynamics. And you see that the connections here are done by between hidden states, which allow us to specify set points for the zeroth order. And this is like discrete active inference models or predictive coding networks. So we can use this hierarchical architecture to more advanced control. For example, we can reach multiple targets or avoiding moving obstacles. Like this is a very simulation of Neo from the Matrix, and you can see that we can simulate a very complex behavior for the human body, and this is done by just defining attractive and repulsive potentials at each element of the kinematic chain. So last point, recall that in the previous unit, we achieved some sort of multi-step behavior by a higher level prior, which in this case was the detected belief. However, in most cases, we need for realizing a more dynamic planning, we need to use the low level information from the perceived from the perceptions. So the problem here is that since the hidden causes are generated by Gaussian probability distributions, the dynamics prediction error flowing back can just infer just one over many possible combinations of attractor gains. But what we really want here is to infer the most likely intention to have generated our current trajectory. Okay, so to do this, we define we sample the hidden causes from categorical distributions, which are linked to the discrete model directly. So in this case, the hidden causes act directly as the discrete observations for the discrete model. And you see that the Bayesian model comparison is done at a lower level between the discrete hidden causes and the continuous hidden states. And second, we can now use these the dynamics functions that I defined before to update for the reduced probability distributions. And these dynamic reduced priors, these are the reduced priors of the agent can be updated over time, so that these reduced priors can represent not just a static positions, but they now represent some potential trajectories for some discrete hypotheses. So they can encode a tool picking action or a ball reaching action. So if we compute the top-down signals through Bayesian model average, we precisely get the same result as before. We see that these dynamics functions, which represent the different agents hypotheses, are weighted by the discrete probabilities, which are now encoded in the hidden causes. And for the bottom-up message, they can now perform some kind of dynamic evidence accumulation, since the log evidence here can now score how well some you can score how well some potential trajectory explain the current trajectory of the agent. So it can answer whether I'm reaching the ball or I'm picking a tool. And these are still very basic applications of this kind of dynamic inference. This is a perceptual task in which the agent has to infer which one of the two targets is following. And the agent here is moving along a circular trajectory, which is represented by the dark blue arrow. And while the green and the red arrows represent these potential trajectories, these dynamic hypotheses related to the reaching actions of the red and green targets. And you see that the agent, even within a single discrete time step, the agent is able to infer these trajectories and dynamically. And for motor control, we can use it. This model also for motor control. You see here a dynamic pick and place operation in which the agent maintains and updates a belief over the target position represented by the purple circle. And you see that with this dynamic inference, the agent is able to accomplish this dynamic operation. So putting everything together, for tool use, we now define different factorization for the intrinsic and extrinsic hidden states of each level in three components. So we have a first component encoding our actual body configuration and these potential configurations related to the tool and the ball, and we compute the forward kinematics for each of these components. So this is the continuous generative model. You see that for each degree of freedom of the agent, we have an intrinsic, extrinsic module, and we have three parallel pathways for this for the actual and these potential trajectories. And you see that the first one generates the arm perception and the visual observations of the limbs. However, since the problem now is that we have a hierarchical dependency of an object of the tool in this example, and we need flexible hierarchies. We need a way to encode this hierarchical dependency of an object in relation to our hierarchical configuration. So what we do in this case is to consider a virtual level for these two potential configurations, since we want the agent to reach the ball with the tool's extremity. So, and this virtual level actually doesn't exist in the real generative process, but considering these two potential configurations, the tool actually augments the kinematic chain as if the tool were a new joint or an extension of the limb. So this is in this way, the agent will think that its kinematic configuration is augmented with the tool. And you see that in fact we have the visual observations of the tool's origin and the tool's extremities are at its level and considering this virtual level. So we now define the agent's intentions for these two steps of the task. In the first one, we just set the hand position to be equal to the inferred tool's origin, while in the second step, you see that it involves, and these are the green one and the red one are the inferred these potential configurations. And you see that in the second step, the ball reaching action also involves the virtual level, since we want the tool's extremity to be equal to the tool position. And although this virtual level doesn't exist in the actual body configuration, this dynamics function here biases our body configuration by backpropagation of this third component here. And we then align our hand component, the hand level of these two components to the third component related to the ball. So now this is another graphical representation of this model, in which we have I plotted here also the discrete model, and we define here the hidden causes for this is the hand level, and this is the virtual level, and you see that we have the hidden causes for these intentions of the agent, and you see that I also added a third hidden cause, which represents a state intention. So this is actually needed because we are now inferring not static positions, but we are inferring dynamic trajectories. So this is very similar to the stay action commonly used in discrete models. And we can interpret these hidden causes as the agent's desire to maintain the current state of the world. So we now link these hidden causes to the discrete states, so that the discrete model can infer the environment by accumulating evidence over multiple elements of the kinematic chain and the end of this object, these potential configurations of the object. So this is a video simulation of the final task. You see here this potential and the actual body configuration, and in the first plot to the right represents the bottom-up message from the continuous model to the discrete model that conveys this log evidence for the hand level, and the second one represents the bottom-up message for the virtual level, so that you see that in this case we don't have the two reaching action. And then we have in the third plot we have the dynamics of the discrete hidden states. So you see that since the ball is moving away from the agent, the log evidence of both levels assign lower and lower probabilities to the ball reaching action, and you see that as soon as the agent grabs the tool, the discrete model imposes a prior over the second action, and you see that all the three body configurations slowly align to the third one, and you see that the agent, as soon as it touches the ball, the agent continues to track it until the end of the trial. So summing up, I actually have, before you ask me questions, I actually have some questions for you. This is the graphical representation of this model, and I showed you how these advanced behaviors can be represented by combining very simple units in a hierarchical fashion, and with by using very simple likelihood and dynamics functions. However, the real question is how we can reach this model from this model, which represents the hierarchy of cortical loops made of several cortical columns. So I think that assume that it makes sense to express the kinematic chain of the agent by a continuous model. I think that one interesting question would be how we can learn the agent's kinematic structure along with some continuous dynamics. So I think that one idea would be to define a hierarchical active inference model with in the wake of political networks. So by having very simple likelihood functions made of combination of neurons and nonlinear activation functions, and but in this case, this hierarchical model would generate propositive predictions, so that the agent, by learning, by adapting the weights and biases of the network, could learn its kinematic structure and concurrently interact with the environment. And there are other few questions, very interesting questions regarding the interface between the continuous and discrete models. And these questions are about how the agent can flexibly use and learn these intentions. So how it can assign different intentions to different objects, and considering the object affordances as I showed you in these examples. So and how the agent can construct discrete representations of these intentions. So in general, how does the process of task specialization work. And thank you. These are the two papers about this model. And if you want to read the second one in particular, I suggest you to wait a week or so, because I'm updating. I'm publishing an updated version of the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matteo. That was great. Just a quick unmute and round of applause. And then I think we can go to questions. Just feel free to raise your hand. If you have a question, maybe also with regards to the last questions that Matteo raised, if you have anything to say regarding that. Otherwise, I can maybe just start with a bit of an ignorant question. I was just wondering sort of the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic representations. If you could just explain this again, because I didn't really understand that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. First, yeah, maybe I didn't explain it very well. So let me just go. I don't know which is the best slide. Yeah, maybe this one. Well, yeah, in short, we have by the intrinsic. You know that commonly in active inference implementations, you usually have a single unit doing with the hidden causes encoding the Cartesian position, and the hidden states encoding the body entangles, and these are they have this unit as mixed reference or reference. So what we did is to divide these representations. So we have the intrinsic hidden state here encode the body joint angles, while the extrinsic hidden states encode the Cartesian positions of the hand, or the Cartesian positions of the targets. So we have for the considering this model here, or better, this model here. In this case, we have a deep hierarchical representation of this intrinsic and extrinsic states. So from a body-centered frame of reference, we generate the joint angle and the position of the limb in a iterative way. So yeah, this allows to define different dynamics for these frames of reference. For example, we could reach a Cartesian position, and we could model the dynamics of the joint angles. For example, in reaching and grasping actions, they're best expressed in both frames of reference, since we want in the reaching action we usually express it in Cartesian positions, while the grasping action is best expressed in terms of body joint angles.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments? Now's the time to raise your hand. But maybe you can also just like leave a minute to think.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I only see ML. But
yeah, okay.
Mio
As
Cola. Yeah, sorry, please speak.
Yes, as I understood, I can speak up. I wonder, can you explain a bit in detail about forward kinematics? Because if you have it in a closed form, like just in it, or is it also learned? I missed this from the presentation.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Do you have your forward kinematics in a closed form, or it's also parameterized by some parameters? So how? Because when you show this derivative control, like when you back propagate it back, I was wonder why, how do you have an access to this derivative?
Yeah, we have we compute the I mean in this example, this is a shallow model, and it's just a two-level model in which we encode all the body entangles and only the hand position. So here we compute this is the generative model computing the forward kinematics of the hand only. However,
This slide 31.
if you consider the deep hierarchical model, in this case we have we start from an extrinsic position, which is the absolute position on the environment of your body, and from that which could be your trunk, and from that you generate by keeping beliefs about the origin of your gentangles, you generate in a iterative way the Cartesian positions of your limbs. So this is done. You see here that the generative model of a specific level takes the position of the previous limb, and it computes by forward kinematics of that level only. It computes the position of the successive limb. And yeah, we have to keep track in this case, since it's hierarchical model, it performs these computations iteratively. We need to track the absolute orientations of each degree of freedom.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions? Or maybe also, Matteo, you can go to your last slide again, where you had some of the questions that you found out, just to remind everyone if anyone has a comment on those. Yeah. I'll just leave a little longer if anyone comes up with a question or a comment. Otherwise, in a second, we'll hand over to Carl, but just maybe a minute to think. Alrighty, then I think it is your turn, Carl, if you want to take over.
Good, thank you. So it's my turn now.
It is, I think.
Very good. Now, that was a brilliant presentation, and perfectly timed, given it's now 45 minutes since you started. Yeah, I think you should have presented for about an hour or so, just to, because you presented an enormous amount of material and assimilated and assembled a lot of clever notions in terms of inverting generative models in this particular and very challenging context. Just before I ask or rehearse a couple of the questions, have you done all this by yourself then? Because this is quite remarkable to have achieved all this without sort of working in the space of these things. Are you working by yourself or with Giovanni or?
Yeah. I'm I'm working with Giovanni and Ivo, but yeah, I mostly they supervised me, but most of the work I did it by myself. And yeah, I actually did it in the last 1 year, 1 year and a half, and this is just the summary of this, all the findings of the novelties that I worked on these years.
Right, that's very impressive. And what coding framework have you used? Is it Python or Julia or MATLAB?
Python.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I used a very simple, a very nice graphical engine, physics engine on Python.
I see. I mean, you clearly have a very deep appreciation of all the mathematical tools that have been in the literature in terms of, you know, linking discrete and continuous dynamics with Bayesian model comparison and path integrals of the variational free energy. So, but you coded all that up in Python by yourself?
Yeah, I mean the continuous model and the hybrid communication. Yeah, I actually saw your code on MATLAB about the SPM, and I tried to I debugged that code, and I tried to give an idea of how it works in practice, and then I implemented it on Python by my own. For the discrete model, I actually I followed the tutorial on PyMDP.
All right. Yes. Okay. Yes, that would be a useful thing to do, of course. Yeah. If you, yes, because you know the MATLAB code does not address all the subtleties and the generalizations that you have addressed. So you've done extremely well to take out what was needed to make this more expressive kind of modeling work. You know, particularly in terms of combining intrinsic and extrinsic frames of reference and having this hierarchical decomposition of the different degrees of freedom in the joints, you know, in the elbows and the arms and the shoulders and so on. Okay, so just a couple of questions. So if I understand correctly, you've actually got conditionally independent latent states modeling things in extrinsic and intrinsic frames of reference. So you're not generating, you don't have any prior constraints on the mapping between the representation in intrinsic or a joint frame of reference and a Cartesian frame of reference.
Yes. Yes, I have. I considered different, let's say, different units encoding intrinsic and extrinsic representations. So they have this conditional independence and different independent dynamics from these different frames of reference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. I have never seen that before.
Actually, the idea at the beginning was to, because you know that if you encode in the target position, if you encode the Cartesian positions in the hidden causes, you have these mixed computations between intrinsic and extrinsic representations, and the idea that pushed me of having these different representations was because you actually computing those computations twice, since the forward and reverse kinematics are already computed by the visual generative model and inversion of that model. So actually the idea was to build a generative model mimicking the real computations of the generative process. So I just placed the intrinsic level at the top of the extrinsic level, and using this decomposition between intrinsic and extrinsic dynamics.
Yes. Now I'm just trying to think.
Yeah, but I think that sorry, I think that because you know that in active inference we usually say that it is the a target position encoding in extrinsic coordinates that act as a cause of our movements in intrinsic coordinates. But I think that because I think that the problem with this configuration might be that this perspective is not it's not so similar. But I think that this perspective still holds, because you have the real question, the real thing about active inference is that you have beliefs about either frames of reference, either intrinsic and extrinsic states, and then these states generate our causes of consequences about proprioception, about the real torques, the real torques of your body.
Mm-hmm.
If it makes sense.
Yeah, well, clearly you have been thinking about this for a year, and I've only been thinking about it for a few minutes. But I'm sure it would make sense if I was reflecting on it. I don't know. It sounds a very plausible idea, but it is very interesting that that in terms of generating a visual scene, for example, and generating the visual consequences of looking at a scene with a particular angle or direction of gaze, for example, you wouldn't have two representations, but you would have to look at the interactions between the ocular motor, or the joint positions of the eye, for example, and the extrinsic Cartesian causes of the scene. But in your case, that it's not quite that simple, because you're actually
maybe sorry if I interrupt you. No, maybe because we did also an extension on this hierarchical kinematic model. I don't know if you see this slide. And we considered iterative transformations between frames of reference. And in this case, we actually simulated oculomotor behavior, but in 3D space. So we had a belief over the point in 3D coordinates, and a belief over the divergence accommodation angle of the eyes. And this these beliefs generate the point in the frames of reference of the eyes, which perform a projection on the camera plane, and then generate the visual observation of the point. So in this case, we can estimate the depth of the point, and we can also define attractors in the projected point. So yeah, we also saw this. I think this is kind of related.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very it's a bit difficult to explain it only in a single slide.
Yes, well, I think it's one of those things you want to understand when you've actually simulated or created the problem and have solved it. In terms of the right way to parameterize the physics, some parts of which are in spaces which are intrinsic, and other parts are extrinsic. But you seem to resolve that. And just for everybody else who's listening, of course, although they're specified as conditionally independent, extrinsic and intrinsic, or allocentric and egocentric, or Cartesian and plant-based frames of reference, they're only conditionally independent given the data. Of course, if they, as you were describing on a slide you showed a few minutes ago, they're both predicting the outcome, so that they're mutually constrained and informed. So it's not as if they're doing completely separate things. They will presumably, well, if everything is working, then they will be internally consistent, simply because they are explaining the same observation space, proprioceptive and visual consequences. I was just thinking, one gets when you can assume that kind of conditional independence, this is exactly what you see in the brain, in a very abstract sense. Just the what and the where streams in the brain. if you can assume that there is a conditional independence between where an object is in the visual scene and what that object is, then you can have two completely separate representations of the whatness and the whereness that are conditionally independent, and then they interact to actually explain what you're looking at, which is a particular object in a particular position. So you get the internal consistency simply because you've put the right kind of conditional independence into the forward model or the generative model. It just surprised me that that kind of structure also, or conditional independent structure, also emerged in relation to egocentric and allocentric frames of reference in movement. But if I think about it long enough, I'm sure that I'm sure I will see it in the simple way that you see it. Can I? Oh, your questions have gone away. We need your questions to go through your questions. Can I just in a very simple-minded way, just to make sure I've understood the basic idea. So in terms of the final simulations and future directions of work, what you want to do is to have a way of simulating and reproducing and understanding sequences of movements where you're using a mixed generative model such that the trajectory or the sequence of planned movements over extended periods of time, like preparing a meal or going from the kitchen into the living room, that's all done at using a partially observed Markov decision process or a discrete state-space model. And then from the point of view of the generative model, these are now effectively prescribing, if I just wanted to generate the proprioceptive and the visual consequences of executing this plan, where this plan is discretely stepping through a number of high-level intentional states, then what I'm generating are the intentions in the form of fixed points, but not just fixed points, but fixed point trajectories. Is that what you're basically doing? And then the continuous dynamics, which itself has a deep hierarchical structure, or at least a deep factorial structure, perhaps a broad structure, as opposed to a deep vertical structure. Sorry, open brackets. When you've got on the graph on the left, on the right-hand side here, you've got the 4 bits. The 4 green squares. I'm assuming that those 4 correspond at one level to the different objects, but at another level, or with a similar graphic, it would be the sort of the shoulder, the elbow, and well, right down to the finger, so that really there is a depth here, but it's more of a breadth, because they're all at the same level in terms of, okay, that's good. Close brackets, right. So the way that you're doing this, just anecdotally, or if you had to explain it to somebody in purely narrative form, is you're specifying the intentions in terms of a succession of set points, fixed point attractors that may actually be the attractor may be an orbit, or it may be a line, a line attractor if you're doing dynamics, and then you're using the forward kinematics model to specify both the proprioceptive and the visual consequences, and then using action or the control variables to minimize the prediction errors in the proprioceptive domain. And that basically means that you can now prescribe very time or temporally deep action sequences that are performed gracefully and smoothly in continuous state space. Would that be a rough summary of what you've the architecture of this scheme?
Yeah, yes, precisely. Yeah.
Okay, with that in mind, then we should turn to your.
Actually, we yeah, there are two kinds of methods for goal-directed behavior. The first one is just to specify a prior over, for example, the hand position. If you want your hand to be equal on some ball for reaching, and that would involve the back propagation of this extrinsic prediction error throughout your hierarchy. And the second method would involve is much more efficient in that would involve the specification of intrinsic states from the discrete model to the continuous model for your whole configuration. So that would be a more efficient goal-directed behavior. So you have, yes, you have these two different hierarchical. You have a hierarchical depth from the discrete model to the continuous model, and then the hierarchical hierarchical depth within the continuous model for your deep hierarchical your kinematic chain.
Right. Can I just ask you to clarify the first bit of that? Then you're saying there are two. Did you mean there are two ways, or are there two factors or dimensions to the? And you said the back propagate the errors. Did you mean actually forward propagate the errors during the inversion? Did you mean propagating using, say, prediction errors to do the Bayesian model comparison effectively of the discrete state that you're in? I got a bit confused by your use of the phrase back propagation. Did you mean this in the sense of machine learning? Or?
No, sorry. No, I meant the back propagation. If you specify a prior here for your hand position, this prior would generate a biased belief, a prediction error, and this prediction error of your hand would back propagate through all the levels of these modules, encoding the joint angles and limb length of your kinematic configuration. So it's a horizontal back propagation, and that would infer some potential configuration related to the to your hand at some objects.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I actually have many some ideas about this transition between the continuous between these dynamics intentions and the discrete states. For example, because we have you have this the precisions of these dynamics functions of this hypothesis, this dynamic hypothesis of the agent, and in this case we have like for example in precisions in general have a dual interpretation, right? You have they can explain for example, if you have a low precision about some sensory modality, it means that sensory modality is not helpful to explaining the task, and it also takes into account attentional mechanisms. So I think I was wondering, this is an idea for future work. I was thinking about these dual interpretations about these dynamics precisions. So in this case, we would have, if we have a low dynamics precision, for example, about a grasping intention, this would mean it would mean that intention cannot be helpful to explaining the task, or that the agent is not confident in using that intention for the realization of the task. So I think that these dynamics precisions would be very useful for learning this mapping between the dynamics functions and the discrete states. I don't know if I maybe it was a bit confusing.
Yes, it was a bit confusing, but it's all very interesting. So some interesting observations here. I mean, clearly the precisions play an enormous role, just in the dynamics irrespective of learning. For example, in the motor system, you've got sort of gamma motor neurons that set the precision, and you need that to sort of do your sensory attenuation to protect your top-down priors from being revised, and so that you can do the movement. So having that dynamics on precisions, even at the level of motor, the sort of continuous motor control part of it is absolutely essential. A biological example here would be with saccadic eye movements. For several hundred milliseconds, you'll want to move to a target saccadic location. But after that, you might want to check that you are actually looking, your proprioceptive input is what you predicted. So now you have to attend to it by increasing the gain so that you get this saltatory turn taking between attenuation and attention. But you're talking about the mapping between the discrete and the continuous. What did confuse me slightly is that, inferring the intention. I see. So, of course, the intention is a prior intention, so you can't infer a prior. But did you mean the following? Did you mean that I expect over the next period of time the path intervals, the trajectories and of the dynamics at the level below, either in extrinsic or intrinsic frames of reference, to conform to this trajectory given this intention from the point of view of the discrete state space. And even though I got a strong prior belief that this is what I am doing, for example, I am reaching towards a ball, I may be wrong, and I may have not have got that far, and I may be in the previous intention that I'm still that I am doing what I was doing before reaching the ball. So is that what you meant by inferring the intention, just to make sure that the dynamics at the discrete level are in synchrony with the unfolding sets of trajectories at the lower level? Is that what you were?
Yeah. I think you're precisely. That is exactly the point. Yeah, I think that I think this is a very important. Maybe I should have given more time to this kind of dynamic planning, because I think this is very important in dynamic environments, because the agent in this case maintain these reduced probability distributions that are used for Bayesian model comparison are actually not static, not fixed points, but the agent maintains these potential trajectories, which can be some dynamics or related to the agent's intentions. So, yeah, the discrete model can infer, can understand what to expect about these trajectories.
Right, good. So if that's the case, my intuition in response to your question, that the degree to which the agent is overconfident about a succession of moves in the face, say, of a changing environment or a broken limb, or they are pushing their arms through water and they did not know that, I think would be accommodated by simply learning the right precision of the transition dynamics of the discrete state space. So I think you're absolutely right. Getting the precisions optimized is important, and the most important balance would be between the prior precisions and the sensory precisions. But in this context, more expressive context, that would look like getting the precisions of the probability transition matrices in discrete state space, the intentional state space, right in relation to how precise the movements are in the continuous state space, or how quick they are. So a simple example here would be there may be some random fluctuations or unrecognized context. Say I am moving my arms against an exogenous force that I'm not aware of, and therefore I'm not quite realizing my intended endpoint because there's some, say, wind that's pushing my arm away from the intention. So I think a priori, my discrete part of the model thinks I have completed. This is the end of the reaching movement, but the evidence suggests that it is not. And therefore I am still in the reaching intention, which just simply means there's a finite probability of not moving to the next intended state. So you just put that in, as a sort of small probability on the current state on the leading diagonal of the probability transition matrix, compared to the larger probability, say 90%, that I'm going to move to the next one. So the precision here is just the, how precise are those probability transition on B matrices in relation to both the actual and consequently inferred ability to actually move from one intentional state to the next intentional state. Is that what you meant about getting the precisions?
Yeah. Yes.
I think then that would probably speak to one of your first. Yes, in fact, you've got it on the slide here. Yeah, I think that in principle you should get for free when you switch on learning, and probably more easily observed when you switch on learning in the discrete part of the model. So as the agent becomes more familiar with the volatility of this environment, with the unmodeled random exogenous forces, for example, basically the noise from the point of view of the lower level, and it becomes familiar with, by repeatedly inferring the trajectories that a posteriori it's by repeatedly building posterior beliefs about the actual trajectories, then you can build the right precision into the transitions between the different successive intentional states. So that's just by accumulating Dirichlet parameters. So if you start off with a probability transition matrix populated by Dirichlet parameters that are small in number, so that when you normalize it, it looks very, very precise. So, for example, let's just take a very simple example where I'm looking from left to right, from left to right, from left to right. So I just now switch from intentional point attractor looking left and point attractor looking right. So I've got a 0, 1, 1, 0 probability transition matrix that this prescribes the fixed point attractor for this act, and then that's followed. Once that's been completed, and I've inferred that that's been completed by the purple mapping, then I switch then in a deterministic way to the second one. If I now start though with a Dirichlet parameter that is something like 1 over 32, 1 over 32. When I normalize that, that's almost deterministic. But if I see a violation of that once, so that I actually stayed looking right because I never actually completed my rightward look, then my Dirichlet counts will now be on the next point. It will be 1 plus 32 and 1 because I haven't moved my state. And of course, when I renormalize that now, I've got a very imprecise belief about the transitions, which properly now encodes my very limited experience of this particular world. But if you can imagine repeating that, then you'll build up Dirichlet counts, which will have the right precision for this particular environment. So I think you're right to you've got that learning of dynamics and precisions, in the sense that the dynamics of the transitions amongst intentional states at the discrete level are the high level dynamics. Then they will also, you'll implicitly be learning the precision of these transitions in a Bayes optimal way. So you'll have a robot that's actually quite cautious and has imprecise predictions because it knows that its environment is more volatile than a very confident robot that thinks that can only operate in a very precise, very clean environment, or a windless environment. So it'd be nice to be able to demonstrate that you get sort of the robot learns to specialize to the kind of, or the agent learns to specialize, not just to, in terms of learning the parameters, but also the precisions that reflect the degree of uncertainty of operating in this kind of environment as opposed to this kind of environment. So, working outside versus working on the factory floor, you'd imagine they'd have very different sort of precisions about their transitions. Is that what you had in mind? Is that what you meant by learning the precisions?
Yes, it was precisely what you described. Yes, yeah. We actually started to with Giovanni to think about this learning about this mapping between continuous and discrete models, and it was the paper that I actually presented at the workshop, and that paper was actually it's merit of Giovanni, and we actually see how it was a model of embodied decisions. Embodied models in decision making, and we analyzed how the agent can infer its decision through its own body trajectories, because we think that this kind of decision inference from your own trajectories is a bit neglected in decision making studies. And we saw that, as you were saying, that learning this mapping between these trajectories and target decisions actually resulted in learning different response strategies. So we saw that with difficult trials, the agent actually learned more cautious behavior versus more risky behavior. And we are now developing this model, and we want to see how this learning, these precisions and its dynamics functions working within this model.
Excellent. Okay. Well, so you've answered your own questions there.
You described precisely what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, learning the precisions in discrete state-space models is very trivial. It's much easier than getting the Kalman gain right in the continuous state-space model. So you should be able to demonstrate a lot of interesting. And of course, what you've just said implicitly means you've also been learning the likelihood mappings as well, which of course will also have a precision. So you should also be able to evaluate how precise the inferences are about the trajectories, and that will depend upon everything right down to sensor noise as well. So that should all be usefully. So, given what you put up here, I'm also wondering whether you're asking yourself, can you learn? Right. Well, sorry. When just thinking about the succession of intentional states. From the point of view of the discrete, from the point of view of the POM-DP, one might tell a story that one can do some deep planning in discrete intentional space towards some goal, and that you could now say, look, I want to be in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. Then that basically entails a whole set of moves, different intentional states, until I get to the final goal of being in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. And you can then just deploy the expected free energy in the usual way to realize those preferred long-term outcomes. In fact, there's something called intentional inference, which I think might be quite useful for you. I can't remember whether that was in the title of the paper, but certainly a very simple kind of deep planning would basically tell you what to do next, given that in the future you want to be in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. And if that's the case, then you may be asking, well, can I now learn my preferences en route? So by preferences, I'm talking about the things that the one important contribution to the expected free energy that dictates which particular transition to the next intended state you're going to take. And if you're asking whether that can be learned, yes, absolutely. And that, if you haven't done that already, that would be another very interesting observation. So, of the kind that you start off with an agent who wants to be in some long-term goal state, and then slowly using inductive inference or sophisticated inference in the usual way, finds its way to, in a very deliberative kind of fashion, by planning. But if it does it enough times, it can now habitize those intentions. So it can now have an intentional habit that means that there's a more precise specification of the different the next intentional state at the discrete level, and that would be one very simple way of showing that you can indeed learn the preferences, but only well, you can learn your preferences in the sense that you can learn habits once you have seen yourself doing, or the agent has seen itself doing the same thing several times. So it now thinks, this is the kind of sequence that I do. And I don't have to plan this quite so much, because the precision of my preferences or my constraints on the outcomes of the next move at the discrete level starts to increase. As I see myself doing everything, you can put, you can formulate the preference, the C tensor or vector, parameterize it as a Dirichlet distribution, and again just accumulate. So every time I see myself, here or here or here, I carve out a path in terms of my prior preferences. That means that the prior preference part of the expected free energy becomes more precise, which means that my policy selection becomes more precise, which means that the empirical priors specifying the intended states now become more precise. So in principle, you should get an agent that was initially cautious because they didn't quite know how to get to some long-term goal, become increasingly confident and habitized, simply by learning the preferences en route. Again, in learning the preferences, you're also learning the precision of the preferences. So you don't have to worry about in discrete models. You don't have to worry about the difference between the precision and the expectations. You've just got a Dirichlet distribution. That's it, and it has a precision, it has a mode, it has an expectation, and everything. Is that what you meant? Have you done that already as well?
No, yeah, we did something, but no.
Can we go back to your? Oh, here we are. Good. Yeah. So how to flexibly learn intentions. Yeah, I think we've spoken about that. As I say, in English it's slightly confusing because the intention is something that is a priori you intend to do. I think so. If you were putting that as a sort of bullet point in a paper, how to flexibly learn learn how to realize your intentions, or how to realize your intentions, how to construct discrete representations. Well, I think you've already done that. I mean, I should also say that the graphic that you've got on the left-hand side here, you've already implemented that. You've got all the key ingredients.
Yeah. Actually, the real question was that interests me is how we can how the agent can learn the structure. I mean, how you can whenever the agent observes some objects, and if the agent wants to perform some multi-step actions, how the discrete model can generate these composite dynamics, which consider how the discrete model can in a flexible way construct these potential configurations For example, if we were, the problem here is that I needed to link the visual observations of the tool at these specific levels of the hierarchical model. So the questions, the problem that I'm asking myself is how the discrete model can assign these intentions and based on the object affordances in a flexible way. I don't know if I made it.
I think there are two ways that you can tackle this. The first is to rephrase the question: how can you learn the appropriate structure of a discrete state space model that is apt for providing the right intentional set points at the continuous level for an unknown environment, for an unknown game? You don't know how many balls there are, you don't know how many joints there are, and I think that would be our solutions to that, that usually require some degree of supervision of the kind of bottom-up messages from the dynamic part. I think the lower part, the dynamics, you'll have to assume is given by epigenetics or by the engineer of your robot. So you can assume that is not going to, you're not going to have to learn the dynamics part, but you are going to have to learn the particular environment or game or composition of objects at hand, and at the discrete level. So you can try and contend with the structure learning problem just given effectively observations that are generated by the inversion of the dynamic of the first, the first level, under the assumption you've got the right model for that, and then accumulate, in the spirit of supervised structure learning, the sequences of observations that you have observed, and grow a sufficient number of states and their transitions or paths in order to model every unique thing that you've observed. That requires very careful exposure of the robot to the right learning, to the right curriculum of experiences. In principle, it can be done with toy examples, but it is a very difficult problem to solve generally. The other approach is to take an overly expressive discrete state space model and basically learn via imitation or do supervised learning. So you show the robot what it should do by literally moving its arms around, and then let it learn what kind of robot it is by showing it what to do. And when it's learned a sufficiently precise generative model at the discrete state space, then you can use Bayesian model reduction, and then you can start to supply it or equip it with prior preferences to actually tell it, okay, in this situation, I really want you to do this. In this situation, I really want you to do that. But before you can do that, you have to build the right generative model. And usually you end up with some form of supervised learning. Another aspect of this kind of learning is just learning what can be controlled and what can't be controlled. And then we're in the realm of motor babbling and neurorobotics, self-modeling, or effectively generating those intentions or policies or action sequences that reveal the most information possible about what I can control and what I can't control. So you'd probably formulate that from the point of view of active inference in terms of the novelty of those, the novelty or the expected information gain about parameters, these Dirichlet parameters on the B matrices, on the likelihood mappings, the A matrices, generating your intended set points. So you're using the novelty of the expected information gain over the parameters specifically to resolve uncertainty about what I can control and what I can't control. Now, I'm not aware of anybody who has done this, but one way of approaching that is to assume a priori, I can control everything. So I can intend this ball to just be over there. I can intend my arm to be over here, and then expose the agent to a real environment. And then in principle, it will, if it has imprecise beliefs, it can control everything. It will resolve those uncertain beliefs by choosing policies that have the greatest expected information gain about the parameters, and it should slowly learn what it can control and what it can't control. So that will be another aspect of structure learning, or learning at least, of a particularly important kind, which is basically learning what is controllable and what is not controllable. So that will be, that's not quite the same as learning, having the right, recognizing a context. Oh, there are 4 balls in this particular context, and I want to move the green one. There's another context where there are 2 balls, and another context where there are no balls, but there's a non-ball object. And of course, every time you introduce a different context, you have to be able to either specify that by writing that down in the generative model, or using this sort of supervised structure learning to build the model, or use a very, very expressive generative model, and then use Bayesian model reduction to recognize, oh, in fact, there are only 4 kinds of things I'm going to have to, 4 contexts, 4 kinds of games I'm going to play here, and then immediately recognize, oh, this is a 4-ball situation, because you've got the visual input, and you've got your multiple hypotheses coming in, and the 4-ball hypothesis will be the one that best explains the likelihood messages from the or the path integrals from the lower level. Is that what you had in mind?
Yes.
Yeah. So to summarize, my experience in this game is you've got 2 ways. You build a model from scratch, very difficult, but can be done, or you start off with an overly expressive model that can infer and learn everything, and then reduce the model down so it just recognizes the contexts and the dynamics that are actually appropriate for this particular set of environments. And if there are multiple contexts, you have to explicitly model those, have a sufficient expressive model, possibly with another layer, 3rd layer, which is a context layer. So that just basically picks out the right tensors of the layer below, so that now the discrete 2nd level of the deep generative model is not only prescribing intentions for the 1st continuous level, but it is also gathering evidence for the context in which it is doing that. Then it sends its messages up to the 3rd level and says, oh, I'm in this context, therefore these set of goals are appropriate. So in this instance, things like the prior preferences C would now be conditioned upon the state, the context at the 3rd level. To do that way, you're going to have a very expressive, very deep model that can do everything, and then let it learn what particular subset of things that it has to model by exposing it to one environment or another environment, or one context or another context. I think that's your choice. Yeah. Where are your questions? How does task specialize? I think just becoming more precise and specialized for this particular task and this particular context. So once you switch on learning at the MDP level, I think you should be, and clearly you have seen this kind of thing when you told me before that your cautious robot became more confident. I think that's an expression of specializing to this particular generative process. How to learn the agent's kinematic structure and implicitly the continuous dynamics. Well, I'm sure you know as well as I do. If you parameterized all the kinetics and the requisite dynamics in the continuous way, in a way that relaxes any brittle nonlinearities, then you should have no problems learning the parameters. So, in the same way that we were just talking about, if you specify some plausible priors in terms of Gaussian expectations and precisions, and then just and then just switch on parameter learning, in the way that do you do any learning does your Python implementation allow for parameter learning?
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't. Yeah, no. With these models, I didn't do.
Okay, well, it's not difficult. If you wanted to scaffold how you might do that by lifting out those bits that you need from the MATLAB code on the SPM in the SPM software, what you're looking for is the things that demonstrate optimization of both states, parameters, and precisions. And that can be described in various ways. We originally introduced that in terms of something called dynamic expectation maximization. It's not really expectation maximization. We just use that so people would understand the kind of scheme. It just involves 3 variational steps. The first one is the dynamic step, which you've already implemented. That's just the generalized filtering. That's just inverting a continuous state space model with Gaussian fluctuations, on the observation and the states. That has some deep hierarchical structure. So you've already implemented that. But you can use exactly the same maths now to do a natural gradient descent on the path integral of the variational free energy, or more specifically, the derivative of the path integral. Very much like you did, you accumulated evidence using the path integral of that Lagrangian when recognizing a trajectory. But now you're actually using this and then taking the derivative with respect to the parameters and then doing a natural gradient descent on that. And that's the E step. And that's written into a number of, there are 4 routines called SPM DEM, SPM ADEM, which is basically the inactive version. So you've got explicit action of the kind that you've implemented. And then there's another scheme which treats the parameters as very slowly moving states. And that's called LAP. So it's SPM underscore LAP and SPM underscore ALAP. So exactly the same as schemes, but they with and without action with the A on. But what you're looking for is the relatively straightforward maths that does a sort of inner loop, which is the D step. So you just go through a period of exchange, playing a game, doing your filtering, doing your the inversion of the state space model, the continuous model, and then you record all the gradients and curvatures with respect to the parameters. Then you take the average precision and the average gradient. You do a natural gradient descent based upon those accumulator or path integrals of the precision and the gradients, and then update your parameters and then start again. And you just keep looping around. Usually by about, if it's not too nonlinear, then you should get convergence within about 18 iterations of that. And exactly the same technology is used to optimize the precisions, but you have to specify the precisions in terms of precision components. But if you do that, and there are a number of ways you can do that, the scheme will automatically do an M step. So the M step is the precision optimization step. So it'll use the accumulated errors to estimate what the amplitude of the random fluctuations are. So and it does that on the same schedule as the updating the parameters. So the D step does a, say, 32 time steps, a little bit of trajectory, or perhaps a complete game or reaching game from your point of view, which it will fail at originally, and then you do an update to the parameters, repeat, update the parameters, and the precisions, repeat, update, and after about 16 exposures, it should hopefully start to converge. So you're learning the parameters and the precision parameters, or the precisions, using exactly the same maths that you're actually inverting the generative model for. It's just that when what you've implemented at the moment is just an online minimization, an online optimization of the posteriors over the states, but you use the same kind of maths. So generally, you can talk about this extension of filtering, or and its simplest linear quadratic control. In many ways, you could say that it's having an integrated data assimilation, system identification, and uncertainty quantification in the same scheme. Or you can say, no, it's just generalized filtering. It's just variational Bayesian filtering with a mean field approximation over states, parameters, and precisions. And then you just do the appropriate variational steps, suitably scheduled, acknowledging that the dynamics are the unknowns, or the latent states in question with the dynamics, are time dependent, whereas the precisions and parameters are not, which basically means you use the path integral as opposed to the instantaneous free energy gradients. But you should that should all be fairly straightforward. To my mind, that's an easier problem than the learning different intentions and different sort of plans and how precise I have to be, or different contexts. That's an intrigue. Getting different kinds of agents inheriting from different kinds of environments. I think that's probably the more challenging problem, or perhaps numerically simpler, but in terms of the space of generative models that need to be explored, more challenging.
Thank you. No, I was also thinking about when I asked myself these questions, these last two questions. I was also thinking about providing an alternative of, for example, a deep active inference, of combining neural networks and active inference, because there are many in the literature. There are many applications that combine that provide efficient, very efficient alternative to reinforcement learning. But what I saw is that they have a single level active inference agent which has a generative model with the neural network. So, and I also saw there's a very interesting paper from Baron that combines the predictive coding networks with active inference. But what I was thinking is that in that case you have a single level active inference agent and this hierarchical structure, but which kind of works as I think as a black box for the active inference agent. So the problem is that for example, in my case specifically, I have this hierarchical continuous model which generates probabilistic predictions at different levels of the kinematic chain. So what I was thinking about is having a hierarchical active inference agent, which whose likelihood functions are combination neurons, like in predictive coding networks, but that in that case, this hierarchical active inference agent would generate probabilistic predictions at different levels. So in order to mimic this particular structure. I don't know if it makes sense.
Bits of it made sense, other bits did not. First of all, the kind of predictive coding that Baron Millage and colleagues have implemented using sort of a machine learning perspective is a special case of this more general Bayesian filtering that you've already implemented. So you can look at what you've already implemented as the most efficient predictive coding scheme you could get, because you've actually written in all the prior knowledge in the functional form of the equations, which if you use a machine learning predictive coding scheme, you would not be able to do. You have to spend a lot of time learning it. So there's no benefit in sort of using predictive coding, machine learning style. You've already got the predictive coding. So predictive coding is another word for this generalized filtering. That can play that has been, if you like, generalized in the machine learning, where you predicate your structure and nonlinearities on a deep convolutional neural network, for example. So I wouldn't worry about trying to find a predictive coding version. This is the best predictive coding version. However, the other part of what you were saying, I think, has a lot of mileage, and that's basically, in my world, would be when you talk about deep active inference. I assume you mean the use of deep neural networks to amortize the inference step. And I think you're absolutely right. If you could amortize your first level, you would have a much more efficient, faster scheme if there is any time bottleneck on the first level filtering or inversion. And second, if there is no planning or context sensitivity at the first level, which there generally isn't, or interesting planning and context sensitivities at the discrete level. So this would be perfectly apt for amortizing. And all you need to do is to train a deep neural network to generate the posteriors that you require for intentional inference by the discrete. So notice you're not just trying to train the neural network to generate the most likely proprioceptive intrinsic and extrinsic expectations. You also have to put the variance in there as well. But that's not difficult. That's exactly what a variation autoencoder does. So you could use a variation autoencoder just to map from the proprioceptors and the visual input to the requisite posteriors in terms of Gaussians, means and covariances at each of the four levels in extrinsic and intrinsic. And you know how to do that because you've already got the training data. You just need to train your variation autoencoder, for example, to do that amortization. In principle, I've never done it, but in principle, that should be easy to do. The question is then, do you actually want to do the training of, say, the variation autoencoder by replacing, by using the variational free energy itself, or do you want to train the variational autoencoder by specifying an arbitrary loss function, which is just the difference between your full predictive coding generalized filtering estimates of the posteriors and the posteriors that the deep network tries to generate. So you wouldn't need to use a variational autoencoder, then you just use any arbitrary convolutional neural network or transformer architecture to map from the sensor space to the belief space, which is just a list of expectations, averages, and covariances over the different modalities that over the latent states that are required for the next stage, which is the discrete state space. So I think that would be an excellent idea. I mean, I think it depends on what you want to do. If you want to build something that's really efficient and people use, that would be an obvious thing to do. If you're still in the game of showing that this is a better approach than reinforcement learning, and it's a much more expressive approach when it comes to understanding robots with attitude and intention, then that amortization, you could leave that until next year. It's just an engineering issue. It's not really a conceptual challenge. So amortization in this instance is basically learning to infer, and that just means mapping from data to posteriors with some universal non-function approximator. So that's what people mean by amortization or deep active inference. I repeat, though, you can't do that if that mapping is context sensitive or time sensitive, which means as soon as you put planning into the scheme, and if you're doing active inference, that planning depends upon your current belief state, because you need to evaluate the expected information gain, and your current belief state is continuously updated over time by definition, then by definition you cannot learn to infer. So you can't learn to actively infer, but you can learn to infer when there is no epistemic part to the imperatives for the most likely actions. So that's what I meant by as long as it's all context sensitive. But I repeat, in your case, you've got that for free because there's no planning at the lowest level. You're just prescribing intended set points. So this would be the perfect opportunity to do learning to infer, should you want to.
Thank you.
I don't think I've got anything else to say other than this is very impressive. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, it's a shame that.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's a shame that Giovanni couldn't make it today. But yeah, he got he was busy and I couldn't make it because I'm actually starting a PhD finally in 3 days with Giovanni. So we have many things, many projects to discuss about future works in these directions. So yeah, it was a shame, but
I'm sure Christoph will send you the recording so you can make him listen to it. He might be able to play.
Yeah, he already asked me for the recording.
Oh, I see.
And yes, I will organize the recording and send it over.
Yeah, I'll switch it off now. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions before we wrap up today? Do raise your hand now. Otherwise, thank you very much.